morning's panel is called Addressing the Shortage of EVTs. All right, so today we're joined by Chris Dennis, Chief Mechanical Officer with Vaughan Fire Rescue Services, Jason Tomlin, Manager of Fire Protection Service for Thompson-Nicola Regional District in British Columbia, Terry Stewart, Vice Chairman for the Fire Department Safety Officers Association, and Jason Whiteley, Fire Chief in North Bay, Ontario. Welcome, everyone. So the format for today's panel will focus on several key areas in the emergency vehicle technician realm, including training, liability, solutions for rural departments, and mentorship. So I'd like to begin the discussion with Terry. So Terry, if you can please tell us a little bit about what's happening on the training front.
Good morning, Laura. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me involved in this on behalf of myself and the Fire Department Safety Officers Association. The industry has gone into a very difficult time for us, and I hate to use COVID. We all kind of use COVID as why things are happening to us, but in the fire service, it created a sleeping giant, and it started to wake up in 2019, 2020, and it's very awoken now. But I'd like to start with a little bit of history about the Fire Department Safety Officers Association. Just to lead into what we're going to talk about today. Predominantly, well, we're coming up on 35-year anniversary, and the organization was started by Mr. Dave Dodson, and it was more driven to the health and safety side. And over the years, we found that the apparatus side was becoming very prevalent. So in the last 6 or 7 years, we used to do a conference, Health and Safety Apparatus, East Coast US, West Coast US, and flip-flop every year. But it became very apparent that there was more need for the apparatus, so we separated them. And so that's going to lead me into where we've headed now. There is a great need and a great want for EVTs, fleet managers, spec writers, that need the training, and it just wasn't there. And from our surveys, there's a huge want for that. But at the end of the day, it comes with a cost as well. But if we don't start to invest in our folks now, we're going to go down a bad road. We really are. Speaking with a lot of agencies, and we are very connected with NFPA, the manufacturers. So we're very up to date on everything that's happening in the fire service. So that led us about 6 years ago, and Brian Brown, my co-instructor, a board member, he's an SME with the FDOSA. I use Fire Department Safety Officers, FDOSA. So the biggest part of that whole program was driven to EVTs. And then as we started doing classes in the US, and we have started doing classes in Canada, we found that it wasn't just EVTs, it was fleet managers, it was spec writers that started taking the class. And we didn't really understand that at the time because it was driven to EVTs. So now we've found that we've opened the door to the classes more to pretty much anybody in the fire service and third-party folks that want to come to attend. We found now that fire chiefs around, I have to use North America as an example, not just Canada. After they've attended these types of classes, the EVT classes that we've put together, they've stopped their spec writing, they changed their orders. So the program has really taken off. And I guess the big part about the program is we're mobile. We would come to you and do the classes, where I know British Columbia has a very good EVT association. Florida is a very big one. Ontario has a very large one as well. I believe they're the 6th largest in North America, which is quite an accomplishment for those folks to become that. That's troubling in itself in Ontario because we lost the Ontario Fire College, which I know Chief Dennis is going to speak to later. It's created a difficult problem in the service. It really has. I guess I need to touch before I get into the EVT classes that we've done and partnering with Canadore College in North Bay. I was on a phone call on Monday just recently and was told a manufacturer is about 700 days for first pre-build inspection. Now, predominantly in the past, we were a year out, we could build a new apparatus. Now we're talking 700 days for the first part of the build. And so that leads into 1,000 days, 1,100 days, 1,200 days, which I was told that some of the manufacturers are struggling with. And it's not because they don't want to sell the vehicles. They don't have raw materials to build them. So we're in a difficult time. So leading up to all that, that's why this program has started to take a lot of traction in the fact that we're starting to train folks. Now they're starting to see the maintenance side that some of us haven't really done well at. A lot of times when you see a fleet manager say, "We can't keep up, chief." Well, you don't have a good preventative maintenance program in place. And now even the good departments, and Chief Whiteley will speak to that in a little bit, they have a very good fleet department. They have a great fleet manager in John Olette, but they're struggling as well. So the biggest problem is we don't get parts. And even if we have a new apparatus, there's not parts available for those. I know there's been new vehicles in the last year been parked for 6 months because they don't have parts. So predominantly we were always 20 years, 15 years as a frontline vehicle, 15 years, 20 years as a reserve apparatus. We've all tried to move into 15 years reserve apparatus and 12 years frontline, but now with the builds being pushed, now we're going to move back again, and our builds are 2.5 years out. And by the time they do training, when they get the vehicle, there's a long lag in there. So if you're on a replacement schedule, like most departments are, or a lot of volunteer departments that are maybe a single truck haul or a 2-truck haul, if they're waiting for a replacement in 2 years, now they're driving vehicles that need maintenance. And that's why this class that we've developed has become very, very prominent in both Canada and the US, only because we've had a big cry for it and we've learned a lot in the last 5 years about it. So with this big giant waking up post-COVID, we're all in a crisis. We really are. So I want to touch on Canadore College in North Bay, and thanks to Chief Whiteley, he approached Fire Department Safety Officers Association about 1.5 years ago, and we kicked off a program, and now we have partnered with them, and we're delivering level 1 EVT classes, level 2, level 3, and level 4. But not to scare everybody about saying EVT. F1 and F2 are very good programs designed for engineers. That's a US term more for a driver operator, as we use in Canada. And also spec writers. And we've had those folks in the classes and we didn't really understand what was happening. And now we're having more and more of those types of folks. The other part to that is with these classes, fire chiefs, I do know in Ontario, 2 specific, have third-party truck shops that are working on their vehicles. And just 1.5 years ago, the chief called us and he says, "Terry, what is it going to take for these folks to be compliant?" Well, it all stems around NFPA, and these folks were just working on his fire trucks, but they weren't compliant. So I know Chief Whiteley is going to speak to that in a little bit. There's a huge liability if they're not trained in the EVT world, in the fire service. So really, Laura, that's pretty much all I have. I mean, I can add a lot, but I mean, it's a difficult time. And if we don't start mentoring our young folks and I'll go to the North Bay College. Why we did that is they are a heavy equipment school for mechanics. So these young folks are going to be able to add the EVT accreditation on behind them, which is a great bonus to us. So if I was Chief Whiteley or Chief Dennis and Chief Tomlin trying to hire an EVT, at least now they have some background, and they do get physical hands-on working on trucks, testing, and what that all means. I guess I could go on, but I think the scary part is when we find we do these classes, and please, when the audience, if you want to ask questions, tell me where you're at. You probably don't have a good PM program going, and you're stuck. You're stuck in a corner, and you can't keep up day-to-day operations to provide a 100% operating apparatus. The other side to that part, everyone, is a lot of times we do classes and we're finding, we ask them for their pump test sheets if it's third party. We ask for pump test sheets internally. And as we start to read them, there's check boxes that are missed. They're not doing sea level calculations. They're not doing vacuum calculations when they actually do the pump test for its annual certification. So once we go through all of that, because if they're not doing the proper math calculations to do the pump test, they're overworking the vehicle extremely hard. And we found now that this class has really moved it forward. We have a very good success rate in the class, about 72% on an average of 20 to 21, 22 students. So we're very happy with the program of where it is. And that's pretty much Laura, Laura, for me.
Okay. All right. Well, Jason or Chris, do any of you have any sort of additional comments you wanted to add on Terry's piece there?
Hi, Laura. Chris here. Yeah, what the components that Terry spoke to are stuff that we battle with. I'm blessed, and I'll explain more on my end. But the city of Vaughan, the fire department that I work for, we do have a full-blown apparatus division with, and I will say, IFF members, and we are completely self-contained. We're seeing, especially with attrition, that the lack of, as Terry said, mechanics that are up and coming are far few and in between. And one of the other things that we struggle with, not just from my standpoint, but again, because I've worked with Terry and the FDSOA in the past, is just trying to get the message out there that there's something more that technicians can grab onto. And I think even through Firefighting in Canada, the magazine that you have helps to educate fire chiefs in particular, as well as those that are watching again even today, to ask a lot of questions. Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, how many times has a mechanic come to you to say, hey, how do I get into the fire department?
Well, that's the other problem, Chris, and that's a very good point. And I think on the downfall on our side a little bit is marketing. We struggle with that. There's no question about it. But we need to get the word across the countries, in the lower 48 and in Canada. We need to start mentoring our folks, or we're going to go down a bad road in the next 5 years. As we all know, with the EV world coming on board very, very fast, we're having a struggle to keep up with what we have now without adding that to it. There's fleet managers are in a terrible spot right now. They need to stay on top of things like years out. It's not today, it's years out. And you yourself, Chris, I know if you need a replacement, if you're expecting one in the next 6 months, you're probably not going to get it for another year. I do know in Mesa, Arizona, they were probably one of the most elite, as you've worked there, Chris, in PMs. And I just spoke to the chief there, Chief Nicholson. They're struggling. They really are. They can't keep units on the road. There's no parts. And it is a problem. So we need to get the word to our fleet managers, the chiefs, and we have to start training our young people, or, I'm sorry, we're getting older, and We're not going to be in the industry much longer. But the new ones, they got to take over, and they got to grasp this very, very hard. I wish we had this program 15, 20 years ago when we went into the trade. It would made a huge difference. So hopefully we can bring this forward and make a difference. And having said that, we've been working with the provincial government in Ontario, and I've been pushed up to the Ministry of Labor now, and waiting on that. So they have a big interest in the program, and the fire chief of Ontario, the assistant fire chief right now, Tim Beckett, who I worked for a number of years. Those folks are all on board, but there's a dollar sign attached, and they're struggling as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Chief Whiteley, maybe you want to jump in at this point and touch a little bit more on that liability concern and what you're seeing with your role on the training side there.
Yeah, like, thanks again for Firefighting in Canada, doing this. And, one of the things I kind of sort of worry about, but everybody focuses on that big red truck leaving, and we forget about everything else that's in the fire department, from our prevention division to our communicators, and especially our EVTs. If you do not have a good maintenance program, or, the ability to have EVTs and a consistent program, that truck doesn't leave. How do I provide that level of service that the citizens are expecting? And when I really look at the liability, and that's a big part of the chief's job, is limiting liability to the department and the corporation as a whole. And the fire service, there's a lot of chances for this to creep in. But when we look at it, like, we're becoming a more litigious society in Canada. And if you haven't seen, insurance companies, they're great at trying to mitigate their losses. And so what I worry about, kind of on like three different fronts is, first, the response front. If I don't have trucks available, or the truck has a catastrophic failure at a scene, because of the lack of maintenance, will that insurance company be coming back and looking at mitigating some of its loss, saying is, as a fire department, it's expected we do our calculations based on the type of fire department that you have, and you had an aerial truck that you didn't maintain, and you didn't have a ladder, and you're partially responsible for that loss. We've already seen it in North Bay, where we had a fire, and the company hadn't maintained, like, the sprinkler system in the building didn't operate, couldn't prove that they had maintained it to the fire code. They lost 25% of their claim. The insurance company came in and said, you're partially responsible for the loss. You have a responsibility under the Ontario Fire Code to maintain your sprinkler system. You didn't. You're this much. So that's $1 million claim. Now you're only getting $750,000 a claim. That's a big chunk for a company. So that's the first one I look at is response. But even just as important is firefighter safety. You have in North Bay, we're a fully career department. We are an aggressive interior attack, offensive department. You have a team inside working, and you have a pump failure at the wrong point, and now you don't have water. Or, like I said, that ladder. So, the safety of your firefighters is paramount too. And anybody will know is if a firefighter starts losing confidence in their equipment, things go sour pretty quickly, and becomes a bit of a nightmare for the chief to manage that optics on your equipment. But even more so too is then you take it a step further is the public safety part of that. That you can't deliver the service, but you have a truck speeding down the road, and you have a brake failure or a tire failure, and that truck crashes into another vehicle, and a civilian is killed or injured. Your firefighters are killed or injured. So what is all the liability of not maintaining your vehicles? And so these are one of the things that I really concerned about as a chief, and that's why we've been building up our EVT program here in North Bay. The other thing that we have to look at too, in Ontario, our Ministry of Labor has what we call Section 21, which is a special section of the Minister of Labor that produces guidance notes. So there's a whole fire service section of guidance notes. And basically what our Occupational Health and Safety Act basically is kind of, you need policies and procedures for everything that you do. And then in the lack of a policy or procedure, the administrative labor inspector will go in and he'll take a look at a guidance note and say, this is what is considered the best operating practice in the fire service. And anybody in Ontario that's listening, we all know 25(2)H is a pretty broad statement, is that the employer shall take every precaution reasonable in the protection of the worker. But if you go into, there's 8 guidance notes just under apparatus and equipment. And 1.2 is about maintenance, that you should have a preventative maintenance program. And that's what the Ministry of Labor is going to be looking at. And it specifically references the standard, I think it's 1911, which is the maintenance standard. If you go to guidance note 1.8, it talks about how to spec new trucks. And again, it references 1901, the CAN ULC, wildland. It references all these standards. So if you're not aware of these standards and speccing your trucks, and you have an accident or a failure, that's what people are going to be referencing. So it's so important. And I also think that we don't, the program starts from the day you start speccing that truck. Our first meeting when we spec a truck in North Bay is with our mechanical fleet. What needs to be changed, what's wrong or with the existing fleet, how can we change that? And how you're speccing the truck to the conditions, its mission within your department, that's key. We had a bunch of years ago, and probably Chris or Terry could talk a little better about it, but the Ministry of Transport was coming after because of the amount of fire trucks that were overweight and were breaking, Highway Traffic Act rules. How many departments are not thinking about when they put all the heavy stuff on one side of their truck? You got all your cribbing, your extrication equipment, so one side of the truck's heavy. So how is it, those trucks are designed and engineered for weight and understanding all that. And, you come back and you worry about all these different things. Like I said, a tire failure, the truck rolls over because you've put everything onto one side. The truck is weighted and designed to operate. So knowing all this and is imperative when you look at the whole life cycle of your fleet. The other thing too is, especially for smaller departments, in Northern Ontario, there's only a few big career departments. Most of our departments in Northern Ontario are small volunteer departments that don't have the luxury of having an in-house either fleet division or mechanics within your own department. So you're sending your trucks out. And if we got to court, are you going to be able to say that the person that worked on your truck had the requisite training and knew the standards to keep that truck on the road? Now, a mechanic is a mechanic, a Red Seal mechanic to an AS, I think it's ASE mechanics in the States. Any mechanic can work on my brakes, like, a Red Seal mechanic can do the brakes, the engines. It's the electronics on the trucks, the hydraulics on the trucks. Like I said, already, understanding the weight, all that, the proper tires on the vehicle, inspecting, the tires, you're not going to get a tire failure or something like that. And then, of course, we've already started to allude to the changes are fast and coming. The days of, you can rebuild a Chevy carburetor and you had 3 parts left over, the thing would still run. Those were the heydays, but the trucks are so complicated now. And so how do we keep that going and supporting, our people? And then Terry sort of alluded to, what our struggles here in North Bay, and our struggles are getting mechanics. I know, Chris mentioned it too. Like, we started when John, our fleet manager, and I both started with the city around the same time. We were looking at, being able to provide services to our neighboring departments on the fleet side. And our fleet, you can just only keep up with the fleet with the North Bay because we're losing mechanics. Everybody is stealing from everybody, especially in the north, and especially the mines. So I just get a mechanic up to a certain level of EVT training, and he's stolen for another $1 an hour to go to another company, and we're all robbing. And it's sad that our school systems are not promoting trades like they should be. And we're not seeing the influx of trades and getting, you know, mechanics in. And that's our biggest struggle is, you know, we've got great programs in place and we're able to maintain, but we're losing mechanics, and then it takes, you know, a little while to get a mechanic back up to speed to where, as the fire chief, I want them, you know, and that was sort of the, you know, reason about trying to bring a more consistent program to Ontario with EVT training.
Makes sense. Jason or Terry or Chris, do you have any comments you want to add on those notes?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I'd like to jump in a little bit from what Jason said, and he's very point on what he's talking about. And that's been our struggle all along, building these classes and trying to get the word out there. I would say the US is a little bit better off than we are because they have the ability to have grant money a little bit easier than we do in Canada. That's why these programs are extremely important nowadays, just from what the chief just said. The other part to that is all of our folks listening, and we need to get the word out. You need to touch NFPA 1901, 1911, and 1071 is the qualifications for a fire mechanic. The only part that I want to speak to what Chief Whiteley was talking to was you need to really get into NFPA. They are a great group of folks. We do have board members that sit on the NFPA committees. But with the 1900 changes now, they're going to consolidate it all. And they are going to put onus on the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction in the fire department, which is normally the chief unless designated different. You're going to need to list the equipment to the manufacturer when you do an RFP for a build. That sounds very simple, but that's not as simple. And that's trying to eliminate exactly what the chief spoke about, overweight issues, you know, compartmentalization. So there's a lot of facets that are changing very, very quick. The industry is moving fast. NFPA is changing. We need to keep up. And if we don't start helping each other, and I really truly believe we have to start talking to each other more down the road, because we're all in the same boat. Some very large departments like Rob Asami that in Toronto now just buying 2 new EVs. Rob's pretty dialed in. He's on top of everything. But there's a lot of us that just don't have that ability to be that way. And if we lose out on a replacement truck, maybe one, now I know he's about to buy 21. So if those 21 apparatus vehicles that he's buying are 2 years out, what does that leave in the back end for the 21 that he's replacing? They need a lot of maintenance. Those guys run hard. So point well taken, Chief.
The other thing too is, you know, the fire service does a good job of keeping the trucks looking really good. You know, but a 20-year-old truck, even with a good maintenance program, is still a 20-year-old truck. And I call it creep. You still get creep into a 20-year-old vehicle. And we don't put a lot of kilometers, you know, some departments don't put a lot of kilometers, but they may work those trucks pretty hard. And you work on those trucks in minus 30, 40 weather, they're even working harder. But it's your counselors, you know, and they're looking at it, what's wrong with it? You know, it looks great. It looks almost new, and it's only got 40,000 clicks on it, but it's a 20-year or 25-year truck. And what we're seeing now with the supply chain is, you know, an aerial truck in 2 years has gone up $300,000. So if you're a small department that's looking at replacing, and you know, go to council and see, you know, that pumper like 5 years ago when I planned for it was $300,000-$400,000 for on a commercial chassis. Now that's a $650,000 truck. Or, you know, there's pumpers that are going out the door at $1 million on, you know, custom chassis. You know, council is going to start pushing back in putting the fire chief into a precarious situation, and you needing to maintain and keep those trucks. You know, for really small municipalities, it's going to, I think it's going to be a real challenge over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good, I mean, on that note, this is a good segue into what Chief Tomlin's going to talk about with some solutions for rural municipalities. So Jason, maybe do you want to share what you're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to explaining a little bit of our evolution, I guess, in how we got to where we are, and we still have a long ways to go. And I might as well start a little bit back in 2015, where the Office of the Fire Commission came out with a playbook, created the minimum standards. And part of that created the definitions, which was the AHJ that Terry referenced earlier. And that made government stand up and take notice, where I guess typically they might have ignored the fire services, and they just, knew the money went there and they took care of themselves, and that was all good. But now with the AHJ component, the way it's interpreted here in British Columbia, it's really the local government that's going to wear that badly if something goes sideways. And so through 2016, we were trying to do implementation. What also was taking place outside of our local government was all these society-run rural fire departments that had the same mandate. And as Chief Whiteley mentioned, the litigious nature of society now, these groups didn't want to be responsible for fire departments, fire service, apparatus maintenance, training, and so on. So they came to, in our regional district, they came to our elected officials and said, hey, we need to get out of this business. Although we want to protect the service, we think you're better off running it than we are. So that kind of went through the whole 2017 piece. And in 2018, we did a lot of public assent processes through a number of our communities, ended up taking on a series of fire departments along with those service areas. And now we're sitting here in 2019 with the new reality of 8 fire services, 177 firefighters, 30 odd some pieces of apparatus, and we're responsible to make sure it all works. So that's where the rubber hit the road, I guess, so to speak. And we had trying to put all those pieces together to ensure we're meeting our annual, pump test, ladder testing, getting the inspections on the trucks, making sure we have a preventative maintenance program, and do it consistently across 8 fire departments was a bit of a challenge to get that up and running. As you could appreciate, we had 8 fire departments running independently with 8 chiefs that had their own way of doing business, and we're trying to regionalize this a little bit and create some consistency. So that's been actually a great process, and I can say, I'm happy we have 8 awesome fire chiefs that are really passionate about what they do in their communities. But what we did realize is all the EVT side was farmed out. It was third party. And because we're rural in nature, we ended up spending a lot of windshield time with these EVTs because they're coming from Alberta or from the coast to come service the trucks. And we were on their timetable because they were kind of on the milk run, so to speak. And so when they showed up, and it was great if everything passed, but God forbid a pump test failed and they needed to replace a valve. Well, you got to wait a month and a half for that to get fixed and retested, or something failed. So on that, I guess what we did was looked internally with 177 firefighters. Again, these are paid per call. They're not career firefighters, so they all have other jobs. Recognize a lot of them are Red Seal heavy duty mechanics. Identified some that wanted to go forward with the EVT training, and just supported that process where we're trying to really do vertical integration within our fire service and mentor people that have that mechanical background to take the EVT courses, getting them certified. And then we have full control on fixing, testing, maintenance within our realm of our own rosters. So that's kind of in a nutshell where we're at, and we still got a long ways to go. And I'm a little bit envious hearing you guys talking about all this new apparatus. We live in the back end of the apparatus world on the last 10 years of life, when we don't, we have small budgets, we can't afford new apparatus, so we're buying used stuff, 100% of the time, and then just doing a lot of upkeep and maintenance, and just crossing our fingers that everything works out. But definitely having that internal capacity and continuing to build it and mentor people to take that role on is being a key to our success moving forward. That's about it.
So was it a challenge to sort of assemble funding to do that additional training?
Not really. This really goes back to the passion of our firefighters, and they were just doing it on their own time.
Okay.
We would cover mileage to the testing facilities and stuff like that. And right now through this year, we're currently in a whole remuneration review of our whole fire service. So we can build some, hopefully, sustainability, because the attraction and retention is always the other piece to this. And if we don't ensure that we're doing that properly, we're just not going to keep the membership up.
Yeah, for sure. All right, comments from the panel?
Jason, it's Chris. Thanks very much for your time. Question, vehicles that need to be repaired, are they being done in the station, or possibly at, if one of the heavy techs happens to have their own garage, are they going there?
It's definitely a blend depending on what it is specifically. If it's something of small of nature and we can do it within the station, we try to keep the apparatus at home as much as possible. If we have to run it out to a third-party facility because it's something a little bit more complicated, then we do that. But for the majority of it, unless there's catastrophic issues, we're able to do it within house.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Just one quick comment from me, Laura. And thanks, Jason, that what you're doing out there, that's just wonderful. That you're training EVTs. I think there's another disconnect that we also have is even when we take a new recruit class, let them spend some time with EVTs in the shop. And then you take the EVTs and put them through a pump ops class, and they both start to figure out that, wow, we really do things different. I mean, the EVTs know how to pump the truck, but they work on it, they pump it, it's good. They really don't know what the frontline guys do when they touch a vehicle. And I would have to go to Chris and Jason to comment to that. But and my other piece to what Jason's doing, and I know he's doing it, obviously, from what the program they've started, documentation. Most of us are very bad at it. And if we don't start doing that the right way, the day you sit in that oak box, it's not going to be a fun day. It's just not. The municipality is going to hurt. You're going to get eggs in the face, and it's just not going to be a good place to go. My partner that I instruct with, he's been seconded to court as an expert witness a number of times, and they lose just from bad documentation and not doing maintenance. Whether you're torquing torque boxes and aerials annually like we're supposed to, I can tell you where I came from, we never did it. And I hate to say that, but we never did it. And you get yourself into a lot of trouble by that. And Jason, I would have to go back and ask you about documentation.
Chris, did you want to make a note on the documentation piece?
I was just going to say, in regards to Chief Whiteley, and again to Jason, unless you've gone through a forensic audit in reference to an accident, whether it be on the fire grounds or whether it be vehicle connected, you got to have rubber pants on when the day comes. It's not exciting. We've been through a couple myself, and documentation, as Terry said, was huge. We all learn from our mistakes, but the idea would be here is to educate long before that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was also part of that whole playbook piece that really drove home that we need to document everything we do, right from firefighter training right through the apparatus maintenance and upkeep. And on our side, we've found a records management system that's electronic, of course, so we can get the chiefs to enter that in at the local level, and we have access to it centrally here at the office. And then if there is something that comes up or WorkSafe gets involved, we can simply access those documents fairly efficiently and hopefully alleviate any issues that would be, coming towards us. But it's an ugly situation for sure.
Chris, do you want to talk a little bit more about the mentorship side?
Great, thank you. No, I'm okay. No, I guess, I mean, following the panelists already, my brain is just spinning, and I could ramble on and on, but I'll try to stick to the point. One of the things through mentorship in the EVT program, I've had the opportunity to work alongside with FDSOA, as well as this particular fire department has been very aggressive with outside fire departments coming in, and our own facility being able to educate other fire chiefs and departments in surrounding areas that don't have the same facility that we have. With that, as Chief Whiteley alluded to, as well as liability. So with that, it's a really fine line. What does one fire department do mechanically versus another fire department? We manage our fleet, including purchasing, including gear, and all the equipment that goes with it, purely under the NFPA umbrella. That way, we're showing due diligence to the best of our ability. The idea of bringing new people on, again, I've been able to bring this division up from a small handful of people to a bigger group now. Every single one of the fellas, including myself, came from the private sector. Some of us had volunteer firefighter, myself in particular. So we've been able to get our hands dirty on both sides. One of the biggest pluses that we have here is, again, the facility is when we bring on a recruit class, there's a component that I'll take on where some of these folks have been volunteers, or some of them could have been academics and have only seen the big red truck go by, and now they're on it. We give them a brief overview because all of our engineers or drivers are responsible. Part of the education process, as time goes on, we will do refresher courses. Here I call them technical service bulletins, or TSBs. The automotive industry has been using them for years. We will take a group of people and re-educate them, much like training does on a monthly drill. We'll take a mechanical stand, and I will use my guys as well to do those presentations, because it keeps them engaged, and it's not one-sided. When we get to our fourth class, or once from fourth to, and we get closer to first class, and our drivers are now responsible for the vehicle, we do a full-blown pump and driver's course, which is highly recommended. I'm not going to rant over it, but it gets rave reviews every time it's done, including the instructors that sit back in the class, because when they're hearing from, say in this case, myself, or the technician that is explaining the process, there's something to be said about the expert. Terry used that word as well, versus somebody that is the backyard mechanic. Let's take a firefighter who is a mechanic by trade and bring them in and put them on the truck. Their focus no longer, maybe in the full-time world, is to be fixing it, but when we do the education side, to show them and physically hands-on with a truck in the air, it's almost a full 8-hour go just on the practical side, let alone the theory. It really opens their eyes up when they're looking at a brake chamber on an airboard, or when they wrote their Z to get on the truck. They came on the job with their DZ, but in some cases, they never ever been able to ask something as simple as marking and measuring brake stroke. Which doesn't sound like much, but if you've been involved in any sort of legal audit, as I say, and some of the questions come out to the driver, those questions need to be answered. And we put a lot of focus into that and get a lot of, as I said, a lot of check marks or kudos for that. Even within our service, we're seeing, again, as Terry said, COVID has become a very big deal. We're seeing a lot less people wanting to get involved in the trades. We're seeing the prices go through the roof. I know here in Ontario, even for an apprentice to register in the program, they actually have to pay to get in. And back in my day, and I won't say it was that long ago, it was something that was covered. I mean, you did go on unemployment for some time during your tenure and doing the theory, but you had a place to come back to work. There's attrition in the mechanical divisions. I mean, I run a small division in comparison to my cohorts, be Toronto, Mississauga, and Brampton in this particular case on the outside, that have full-blown facilities specifically designed for apparatus repair. There's a lot more bodies, and with those bodies comes, in the retail world or in the private sector, we could call shop foremans, and in the fire service, we're rank and structure. So we have lieutenants, we have captains, acting captains. In my case, I have an acting CMO. It took some time to even get that position filled, but it's done. And I'm taking the time now to educate my partner moving forward as to what's expected. We do sit, as Chief Whiteley had mentioned, we also are blessed and privileged again to sit on the committee to build fire trucks. I've been building them since the early 2000s, and the way technology changes, to have a mechanical aptitude in the design aspect of the truck, I think plays huge when the truck gets older and needs to be repaired, because some of these small nuances that we struggle, that the engineers don't see when they build a truck, are taking things apart, and how quickly it could be done if they only did this or did that. And by doing that, we're educating the truck builders as well, or mentoring the truck builders in such a fashion. We've seen so many ideas come from so many departments. When we go on and look at your magazine and look at the new builds and who's got this and who's got that, and go, hey, that's a great idea, I want one of those. And then be able to put that forward. I guess one of the other challenges, as well as the, again, purchasing trucks, as Terry said, the waits now are so far out, and when contracts are written or RFPs are done, by the time it's affirmed and there's a dollar value, get ready, they're already doing it. The truck builders are coming back to the fire chiefs and saying, hey, we don't have enough money because of product. It's gone through the roof, and that $1 million or that $600,000-$700,000 pumper just went up to $1 million and $1.2 million on the custom side. Just want to take make one more comment in regards to NFPA. It's a guideline that we here in Canada in a lot of cases follow. When NFPA had come around in the operational side, suppression side, and it looked like it was going to become the standard, guys like me got really excited, because the EVT, emergency vehicle technician, was going to become a must. Canadian-wide, mechanics have to write to a standard, to a certification level. They could be interprovincial. And a lot of us, including myself, way back, would sit back and go, well, I don't need the EVT side of this program. I'm a mechanic. I've been to school. I've been trained on all this stuff. Believe me, when it comes down to us hiring, we will look at an EVT certificate, whether it be just one or whether it be many. That EVT will get the recognition right off the bat as being somebody we would want to bring in, because they've just brought a little bit more to the table than the next guy. The training side of it, we'll bring them up to speed quick enough, but the product knowledge, again, is escalated. Again, everybody said EV vehicles are coming in. We're going to sit back for a little bit and watch what the other guys are doing. And but with the 3 new trucks we have coming in this year, we've advanced in technology. We no longer have hydraulic or gasoline generators on board. They're lithium batteries, and with that will come training. And again, not just for our technicians on a repair schedule, but for the firefighter who is now actually using that piece of equipment. As I said, I could go on for a while, but I think I may have overdone it.
Didn't overdo it for sure. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Does anyone want to comment before I see if got some questions going here?
I just, on that, if you really look at your PM program, it does start with the driver. It really does. They're the ones that are noticing the difference in the truck. If they've rubbed a curb, they're at the truck every day. And if they're not reporting it and it's allowed to keep going, that just becomes a bigger problem in the end. So it really starts there. And, having a mechanic go through and teach the guys, this is the whys and this, and what to really look for, I think is an imperative, and it is the biggest first step that you need to do in your PM program.
Chief, we call it boots on the ground, 100%. Our PMs start at 7 o'clock in the morning when the crews start their first truck checks to the first deficiencies that start to roll through. And then we manage the rest of the day on running repairs or preventative maintenance, scheduled repairs, that sort of thing. But you're exactly right.
So someone has noted, did the EVT of BC close down last June? Jason, do you know? Or Terry?
I don't. My understanding, well, I'm talking about a year ago, Laura, they were a very good association. If they've had some political problems and struggled, I don't know that. I would have to go to Jason.
Yeah, I haven't heard that directly either. And I'm thinking the last EVT test that one of our firefighters wrote was, I think, 2 years ago. So they were alive then.
Would it have to be, again, if it was June last year because of COVID, that the exam centers, training centers, that sort of thing that were in Canada were closed?
Well, it sounds political that there wasn't anybody to take over the board.
Oh, I can find out. I can let everybody know. I can let you know, Lauren. You can post it if you like. I can find out very quick.
Okay. But exams are still being proctored, it sounds like, from the question line here. So in terms of, but no seminars. So there's an overall challenge with this, kind of shortage of trades. And do you think there's anything more that the fire service could be doing to help address that?
Well, Chief's got to put the importance of their maintenance in there and having a good EVT program or a good provider. One of the things I'm on the board of directors for the Chiefs Association here in Ontario, and talking with one of our vendors, a couple of years ago, they had the same problem of getting, their mechanics up to EVT, and a lot of the training when the fire college was open was done through the fire college, but it's only geared to people that are in the fire service. So a private provider couldn't get the training. So, you have a lot of mechanic shops out there that they didn't even have the opportunity. So, that was one of the things too about bringing something more consistent into Ontario. I'm trying to meet my own needs, but also we have a consistent program that, there's the opportunity not only for fire service mechanics or municipal mechanics, but the private sector too. So, that we have that out there and available. And the other thing, and Chris and Terry have talked about it, especially Chris, is technology is changing so fast, and keeping up and having curriculum built to the to the changes, like electric vehicles. It's, in traditional vehicles, we can all spec a Cummins engine or a Detroit diesel, and mechanics use that. But, under the electric vehicles, how is the manufacturer, how is a Rosenbauer going to be different from the Vector truck or from, Pierce's truck if they produce one? And, keeping up with all that different information and being able to put that out, and also putting credibility. One of the things when we brought Canador on board, put FDSOA and Canador together, is putting the new big thing in Ontario was micro certifications in the trades. And they're building the micro certifications for each of these EVT levels. So not only would you be certified through the EVT commission in the, through the US there. It's a US based organization, but you would also get a micro certification, so these Red Seal mechanics can come out and, get this and be more employable and, have something recognizable that's an Ontario standard as well.
Sure.
Slightly, you made mention in regards to the Ontario Fire College. Unfortunately, as we all know, it had closed, and I sit on the board with the EVT OA as a past president as well as a director, and we are struggling because back in the day as well, as you well know, we were mandated by the fire college. We were only allowed so many people, and in most cases, the invitations were put out to the training divisions and full-time, or actually fire department, fire chiefs themselves. And we had heard on multiple occasions where the private sector wanted to get in and there was no room, or it was only being offered to fire departments. And that was a firefighter who was given the task of looking after the fleet, not a mechanic, but eager and wanted to do that. So they would come and sit down and go through that. Again, we go back to it again, education. I've been, again, by using firefighting in Canada in some of my articles, it's one of the things that I've pushed, is that if we're going to take a municipal or a big city fleet technician to work on a fire truck, and they also work on the city salters and other equipment. Take Ontario, for instance, right now with a snowstorm, the fire truck's going to take a back seat to the salter only because of the weather conditions, versus a dedicated fire truck mechanic. And as you well know, as a fire chief, it all comes down to money. It's very, very difficult to have any council swallow that pill. And honestly, I think until there's been something tragic happen, it's like, let's put a four-way stop up, and then when something bad goes wrong, then the traffic lights go up. It just seems to be that could happen. I shouldn't say it has happened, but that could happen.
And, as chiefs, I think we push our training in that for suppression, but we need to look at, continuous development of our mechanics in that. I know John, the fleet manager here, we've done a lot just in all the different programs, because, buses are just as technical, and making sure that the mechanics keep up with that. Just, even trackless, they're all a little different, but, being able to have the availability to get that training. And that was being the biggest problem, because the fire college was once a year.
Yeah, this is a big subject, isn't it? I feel like we could talk all day on this one, and unfortunately we are running out of time. So I'm going to have to wrap up the panel on that note. I do have one more comment that's come in that says, great info. And our fire department uses a few third-party vendors, and I'm hearing that it would be advantageous to have them take the EVT program. Is the program available to third-party mechanics? Maybe we can answer that one quick before I sign off here.
Yeah, so the program that we have, we run it through Canadore College, and it's part of their continuing education division. I can send the information out, or if you just go on to Canadore College, we have two courses coming. They have two courses coming up, a level 1, and then we just added a level 2, the pump course in it. So it's open to anybody that who wants to take the course. It's not through the fire college or anything. It's I just kind of championed the idea and put all the right people together, just so we have this ability to train people.
Right. Thanks, Jason. All right. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I can add a very quick comment to that, Laura. You can tell that individual with the question, absolutely. Third-party people are more than welcome. Because they're touching our vehicles, they need to be trained as well as we do. So yeah, absolutely. And we've had numerous third-party folks because chiefs want them compliant to NFPA. And my final comment, and I don't want to take up a lot of time, but we are American based. There's no question about that. And sometimes that puts a stop sign up a little bit to a Canadian. But as far as the EVT world goes, we live under the as Chris alluded to, the NFPA umbrella. Our curriculum makes no difference if it's a Canadian mechanic or a US mechanic. And our licenses, they're just name differences, that's all. We're exactly the same. So we are very different identity in the service compared to how fire operations happen. I mean, that's a whole different, each department, each shift doesn't do it the same. But anyways, EVTs are all under the same umbrella. So our curriculum fits to a US person and to a Canadian person. And when they do testing, there is no skewed American language in there that they can't answer the question correctly. So just I think that's a strong point that needs to be voiced. The curriculum fits North America.
It can be done online, evt.org, as well. It's just the exam right centers will, again, Canadore, Toronto, those schedules do come up. So evt.org, anybody could follow the track, and it's just the exam site would, and the proctor is what would steer the final outcome.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you, Jason and Terry and Jason and Chris. And we really appreciate your time today. And we're making a donation in your name to the Canadian Fallen Firefighters Foundation in appreciation.